Hi, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. This is Esther Martinez, and we're back with another masterclass in the People Matters virtual learning series. Today's masterclass is on the topic of building a future ready workforce. And I think it's a very critical topic. It's always been for the last few years, but I think with COVID 19, even more because it's forcing organizations to be more process-less, more paperless, and a lot more automated. And I think building the right skills and enhancing skills is going to be able to help us enable that transition. So joining us today, we have the pleasure and the privilege to welcome Dean Tong. He's the Managing Director, Head Group HR at UOB. Hi, Dean. A very warm welcome.
Thank you.
So we're looking forward to your masterclass in particular today because I think your experience, as you know, not only leading transformation for UOB, but also prior to that, working in the consulting space as well, and doing tremendous space in work in the space of talent and leadership across Asia, Europe, and America. I'm very, very excited to welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a very unique setting for this sharing, but I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. So, as Dean, this needs no introduction for many of you who are in this call. I think the work that you have done in UOB, embarking on building a future-ready workforce through the Better You program that we're going to be going through today with you, and also you will help us contextualize what are the things that you're tweaking to enable your workforce as we go through this transition and this situation. So before we go and start with the presentation, and I give it over to Dean, we're going to do a quick Menti poll as we always do. So you will see in your screen that it's appearing menti.com. So I'll invite you to open a new window. Just type menti.com, and the code for today is 295073, which you can see here now in your screen as we go. Now, the first question is going to be interesting because we're asking you to reflect, when is it too late to pivot one's career? And here, we be honest. Is it on the 30s? Is it on the 40s, 50s, 60s? Never. What's your take? And I'd love to see what starts coming as a result. And Dean, we'd love to see your inputs as well, because you work with leadership development across functions and across levels in the organization. It'll be nice to see that everyone seems to agree. Let's see how many more people. It's still not enough sample size. Yeah. Okay. Let's give it a little bit, another few minutes.
People are warming up to.
Yeah. Yes. I'm interested to ask you, while we get the answers to come in, is there any academic research on this question, or is it more just your own experience that you'll comment on?
There's actually a lot of research that has been done on learning agility of the population. Obviously, from a psychological perspective, there is a certain answer, but also there's a physiological perspective as well, in terms of the brain, the peak, and how do you actually unlock the potential as well. So the answers, which you will see in a bit, actually, it varies. And one of the things that we are tackling with the program that we have launched is this particular question itself. Because many people have the answer within themselves, and that may actually result in a self-fulfilling prophecy in the process.
Yeah. So are you surprised to see this data coming up? Is this something you were expecting? It's actually quite balanced, probably except the 60s. Everyone seems to be either 40, 50. The never is, of course, a higher group.
That's obviously the politically correct answer, which is I think in reality, it's in an organization that we're operating in. We actually do see a pattern that you're seeing right here on the chart. That is, people's belief is that you will actually stop learning as you grow older, and that's a reality. And as we go embark on the program, we need to make sure that we actually tackle this front and center And also people want to know what's the motivation for going through such a reskilling program. When are you going to be able to apply it, and even if at all? But you'll be also surprised that in the organization that I worked in at UOB, I once got a call from a 75-year-old secretary was asking me about how to actually download Better You onto her phone, and she was very eager to actually learn. So I guess the answer is, it really depends on how you look at it yourself. But our philosophy is that we actually will actually take everyone along the journey, no matter what age or what group they are at currently.
Yeah. So you mentioned that there is a physiological shift, and that probably requires more additional motivation from the learner. What age group is that as per academic research, if you were to share that with us before we move to the next question?
In the past, for most people who have actually entered their 40s, that beliefs and also that ability to learn starts to slow. And the reason for that is not so much because people do not have the ability to learn, but because in your brain you have actually a lot of things that you have actually kept, and the brain is constantly thinking, and therefore you're not able to take in new input if it's constantly churning. So that is we need to actually relearn to learn at that age group. But you find that some people who actually have learned to be a lot more agile, they are always curious and open to learning at a different age group. So physiologically, there is actually a cycle that we all know, right? But you can actually work to actually address some of those forces that's actually setting in at the different age group.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much, Dil. So let's move to the next question, which I think it's a great foundation for your masterclass. So if I request you all to reflect about what is the one main obstacle for reskilling. So when you're looking at your own organization and you're looking at investing in programs to support that reskilling journey for your employees, what is the number one obstacle? And here you have the answers, whether it's where do you get started from, or how to get the motivation of employees aligned, or how to do it at scale, or how to change behaviors that are needed for the future, or how do I justify the ROI or the resources invested? So that's a very interesting question that will also help us, I think, as we go through your masterclass day to day, to kind of understand what are people's challenges, and you can maybe spend a little bit more time on that as we go through the time together. And probably many of us will be thinking there's maybe more than just one answer. But I'm liking that we have constrained that you can only choose one.
Yes, well, what's the main? Right? I mean, we always see multiple of this. Yeah, and there's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a different stage.
Context, absolutely. So again, we're going to have a balanced group, Dean, it seems. So we will have to cover all of these aspects as we go through the day to day, I think.
Yes.
What do you feel is the most challenging one? If you were to look at these 5 answers, what is the one that it's, probably the most difficult to tackle? Which one will you choose as the most difficult one?
The most difficult and the one that requires the longest staying power from the organization is the fourth one. That is, how do you change future behavior? Right? You can actually take someone through the entire training, reskilling, changing of mindset, but to build that behavior, that has to be reinforced over time, and the consistency and the persistency will be very much required. So once you move your spotlight away from this into the next thing, how do you make sure that this actually doesn't fall back to what it was before?
Yeah. Surprised to see the pink coming up as the strongest one, or you were expecting it?
No, I think when you're about to launch this program itself, so one of the big consideration that you have asked yourself is why are people not learning? Why are people not learning? People know that all these forces are actually coming our way, but what is actually stopping people from taking the next step? And there are real constraints that people are faced with. I think if your program does not acknowledge that and address that upfront, then we will actually be missing out a big part of the our ability to actually address this fundamentally. Right?
Yeah, very interesting. All right, so should we move to the last question very, very quickly, because I want to make sure we have enough time to go through all the material. So very quickly, the last question is a collective crowdsourcing on when do we all think in this call that we will be able to return to normal, whatever normal really means. So we love to see where the group is in terms of their own timelines.
Yeah.
Just very, very quickly as we get through these last questions. And we love to know your opinion as well, Dean, but not yet. Let everyone else first give their opinion first. I think we are all taking a bit longer time to answer this question because it's just so difficult to model, right? It's so difficult to predict.
I think what you see is that even the most optimistic of the lot is actually predicting it to be going away by June.
Yes, agree. So we don't have anybody in June at all, no? Interesting. Does this surprise you to see these numbers coming in?
Not really.
Not really.
I don't have an expectation. Let's just put it that way, right? So when this question was actually put out, but let's stabilize and then maybe I'll say a couple of things here.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's stabilizing.
Oh, now we got some June 2020 or so.
I think optimism.
Yeah, I think even actually the year end is already a bit optimistic. So I think I'm very happy to see that being the number one at least. So we're not going to sometime in 2021, but even though like now we're back equal to 34%.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe let me just make a couple of comments.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
First of all, I don't have a crystal ball. I would not know when this is actually going to be over. And this is not my areas of expertise either. But what I know for sure is that every crisis that we are in, it will pass. Right? That's something that I can say for sure. So the fact that it will actually recover. Now, will that actually change the way we work, the way we travel? I think yes. I think right now, with a bit more awareness of the potential spread of a contagion such as this, I think people will actually be doing things a bit differently, right? Not as open as we were before, but that might be for the better, if you will, right? So previously, when we had SARS, it was seen as a disaster, but SARS was actually a period, if you will, it's almost like a dry run for something big like this happening. So for some of the countries which have actually been more prepared, it is those that have actually gone through the SARS period, right? So see this as really a training ground to get ourselves more resilient. I hope things will recover sooner rather than later. Also from an economic standpoint, there's only so long you can actually shut everything down. And there will be a vaccine that will be available hopefully sooner rather than later. I think the prediction currently is in a year to 1.5 years time. So latest by 2021, I think we should be back to normal. That's my view. Again, I'm not an expert.
Yeah. No, but I love your optimism, and I think that's what we really need right now to keep going and say, well, it's not in our control, but at least we are prepared to do as much as we can. So great. So shall we get started? Dean, I'm very, very excited to go through the journey of your own learnings and reflection. And I think that will also help us cover question 2, which was related to some of the obstacles that the audience who are here with us live are facing. So hopefully we'll be able to cover some of it. For everyone else who is listening, Please remember you have your question chat on the right side if you're joining us live from the webinar, or if you're in the LinkedIn live, you can pose your questions there. We will pick them up from there as well. And over to you, Dean. Looking forward to your session.
Thank you very much. So while this is called a masterclass, I would like to be a bit more humble. This is sharing of the journey of one organization that has actually gone through something that we are all trying to do. That is, how do we bring our workforce along this transformation that we are actually seeing in the industry. And the COVID-19 has actually showed us that some of these things are actually changing, and nothing is actually standing still. In fact, the COVID situation has actually accelerated some of the digital disruption that we are seeing in the workforce. Let me set a bit of a context. UOB is actually a bank in Singapore. It's one of the top 3 banks here, and the business has been doing very well for many years. So UOB is an 80-year-old company. We have roughly about 27,000 employees across the globe. The most of our operation is focused in ASEAN. Now, when we actually look at the banking industry, it is still relatively less disrupted, comparing with some of the other industries that we have witnessed, like in the hospitality industries, in the transportation industry, in the retail industry, where the impact has been actually very much immediate. But the banking is not spared because banking actually enjoy still quite healthy margin. And with healthy margin, you usually attract many people who are actually looking to actually get a piece of that pie. And so within bank itself, we see that the telcos, they also want to extend themselves into the payment and the lending space. And behind the telco, you also have a number of fintechs, and some of these are even just tech companies who are actually looking to also get a piece of the pie as well. Singapore has recently launched 5 new digital banking licenses. So many of these guys are actually applying to be one of those. And then some of the big boys in the tech space, right, are also looking to have a piece of the pie. And therefore, it's no surprising that you see Apple having launched Apple Pay, and Google and so on and so forth. They are all trying to actually position themselves to actually play along this value chain. So we know it's coming, but the question is when and in what form. Now, the Singapore government, having taken a lot of proactiveness, has actually conducted a study industry-wide. And in their study, they actually worked with a consultant, and they projected that 1 in 3 jobs will be disrupted in the financial services industry over the next 3 to 5 years. Now, they even came back to very specific breakdown of which area will be most impacted. I think it's not surprising that the areas that you think will be most impacted are the area where we are today using a lot of brute force, so in the areas of operation, for example, where automation will take over. In areas where the thinking process can actually be replaced by an algorithm. In the past, we think that for a lot of our trading businesses, you require a very specific skill set. Now, this skill set, unfortunately, can actually be a program into an algorithm, and you can even work on the market a lot faster than a human can. And even some of the frontline, like relationship managers, that we think that the human interactions will always make a difference. Some of these things are also slowly actually being replaced by either machines or the digital transformation. And the other phenomenon that we're seeing is that people are actually moving away from working within silo functions to more of an agile teams, meaning that cutting across the different boundaries within an organization itself. And the convergence of certain roles. So in the past, you have very specialized roles, and you can actually split them out very clearly. But given the evolution of the technology and the work processes, many of such roles are actually beginning to converge and combine. So the traditional definition of those are no longer relevant. And that's the kind of disruption that's being predicted, and we have already seen some of those in the market today. Now, just to be sure, banking industry, we are not experiencing disruption for the first time. When trade was first invented, the barter trade was where we all started with. We knew that there is actually economies of specialization. So if you do certain things well, then you can actually exchange through barter trade to exchange for something else that someone else can actually do better. And over time with that, there was an invention of money that was actually replacing the barter trade. And then the invention of currency, notes and checkbooks, right? And followed by ATMs. I'm not sure how many of you are from that era. I still remember the very first time I actually saw an ATM. I was very impressed. At that point in time, people were saying that this will actually revolutionize how banking will be done. And then came online computing. So you no longer need to actually go into a branch to do many of your transactions. In fact, today, many people actually don't go into an actual branch, but still we have many branches around. And last but not least, now we're in an era where people are actually using their mobile phone for everything, right? From maintaining your account to payments to transferring money between friends or between businesses. So what we're experiencing today is actually not the first disruption that we have seen. So, but how do you sort of digest this disruption that we are actually looking at? Now, then we also actually studied how the different industrial revolution in the past have actually impacted the workforce. So if I would take you back to the history in the 18th century, where the mechanical industry revolution was first started, it was actually powered by the steam engine. And later came the 19th century, where the electricity actually powered the second industrial revolution, and followed by computing in the 1969, and now today with digital disruption. Now, each of this disruption at that point in time, if you put yourself back in those times, there were a lot of concerns that this will actually disrupt and take away a lot of jobs from human. And indeed it did, right? And what we did was that we actually went back over time to track how did the jobs evolve during those period of time. And what you see is that with each revolution, more jobs were actually created. Um, and productivity also improved during those times because now there were new tools for them to actually do more with less. And the jobs were actually evolving. And as a result of that, real wages have actually grown during those times as well. So for us, that is actually the good news behind all the disruption. Yes, disruption creates uncertainty, but we also know that with these uncertainties, we adapt, and in fact, we actually emerge stronger and better off, right? If we are actually well positioned. Now, then the question is, okay, all these are good, but what does that mean for an individual? Right? Now, this is where we actually look at who have been actually the most successful in adapting to a changing environment. So if we look at a camel, camel is a very resilient animal. It can actually go for 6 months without food and many months without water because it has the ability to store many of this, right? And it can actually survive in some of these harshest environments. Then if you look at the penguin, some of you would have actually watched the movie The March of the Penguins before, and you know that for the penguins, they actually live in some of the harshest weather in the world, and they will go for months without food as they actually look after the eggs, and they are actually the only species that can actually survive in such a cold and harsh weather. So, are they the most resilient that we can actually learn from? Or should we learn from cockroaches? Because there's a myth that the cockroaches can actually survive a nuclear holocaust when all other species will actually die. And that was what they actually found during after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing. And whether cockroaches is actually the model for us to actually look at. But the truth being is that human is actually the most adaptable one because humans able to think of using tools, using clothing, using multiple things to actually survive in each of these environment that we actually describe. Now, The reason why I actually use this different analogy, right, is to make the point that the most important part about preparing our workforce for the future is to make them adaptable, because we cannot know for sure how exactly those trends are going to impact, or when it's going to impact our jobs, but we know it's going to happen. Um, and the way to actually protect our workforce is to make sure that they are as adaptable as possible. Now, with that in mind, having adaptability as the core of what we're actually trying to start off with, we have actually designed a program that focuses on five critical areas, if you will. The first one being growth mindset. Now, the question that was asked upfront, um, whether you think at different age, you will stop learning. This is actually a challenge on the growth mindset. If we believe that we will stop learning at a certain point in our lives, then naturally this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and we will stop learning, and we will always say that we'll be forgetful in learning. And our very first course itself is to challenge that paradigm using experiential learning to open up their mind to say that there's actually no limit to when we can actually learn, right? So this is actually very much from a soft standpoint, but you need that before you can actually start to build on the other foundation. The second area that we're actually looking at is problem solving. And to be more precise, it's complex problem solving in an area where you actually don't have perfect information. Now, if we have all the perfect information, then the computer can actually solve the problem for us using algorithm. But why human actually thrive is where the situation is vague and there are actually imperfect information. But there is an approach to solving problem in a more structured way, where it will actually give you the credibility to convince your senior management. And this is actually one of the skill sets that we are actually training our employees to learn. The third area is in digital awareness, knowing what is actually happening around us and what are the forces that's actually disrupting our workforce, and more importantly, how that's going to impact the work that individuals are actually doing, will be very important for them to apply their new learning into their job. So this digital awareness is to make sure that they understand how the environment is actually changing. And human-centered design is where we actually applying uh, uh, the solution from the customers, from the employee perspective. So starting with the end in mind and working backwards towards the design. And this very much you need actually human interpretation in order to do well. So if we work like a machine, we will soon be replaced by a machine. And this human-centered design is to accentuate the part where we are really differentiated from machine, and that is our ability to think like a human, to understand and to empathize the experience that people are going through. And last but not least, you need an ability to convince your audience, and this is actually in the art of storytelling. And in today's world, it has to be data storytelling. You cannot simply be telling your story without facts and figures, right? So how do you combine a lot of the data that we have available today into a skill of storytelling? And you can do that well, then you can really differentiate yourself within that workforce. So these are the five areas that we have selected, having looked through many of the different areas as the starting point to help build this for all our employees. Now, we named this Better You, and there was actually a long discussion, but this was a name that was finally taken. Now, I would like to take you through in the last few slides the thinking process behind the program design itself. Just now we actually talked about how do you motivate your employee, how do you think about your investment, how do you make sure that the program can actually reach to a large scale audience within the cost that you have, and how do we make sure that whatever we are actually offering are what employee wants. So as far as our motivation is concerned, there were a few things that we actually thought through. Indeed, learning is something that is very difficult, relearning. Many people in this part of the world, when they learn, they were learning in school, and they were learning for passing and excelling in exams. But once you have actually passed through the schooling and university period, many people have actually stopped learning. So if you like, the machine is a bit rusted to actually pick up to relearn. So how do you break this, right? And then to be sure, they are real constraint for many people when it comes to learning. Um, um, for many of the singles, if they have a partner, um, time that they have available outside of office, they will use to actually spend with their partner. If you're married, then you will need to spend time with your spouses. And if you have children, then you will know how demanding it is. I think we all learn about this during this COVID situation. So as a priority, self-development and learning is actually ranked quite low in uh, our employees' a list of priorities. So how do we then break this problem that we're actually facing with? First of all, we make it compulsory for everyone to actually go through the initial program. And the program that we offer is one where there's actually a 1 day of in-person training, followed by a 12-week of virtual training, right? And the 1 day in-person training is something that we make it compulsory. We work with their managers in the different functions that we have to actually schedule a time to take them out from their work and put them through this 1 day training. And that part is compulsory. So we convince the management that this is actually an investment worth making. But once you have someone starting, right, it doesn't mean that you're successful in your program. You need to be able to finish that program itself. And this program will actually take you through a 12-week period of using virtual learning. If many of you know that virtual learning is actually something that's very difficult to actually get started and to be adopted. I think the COVID situation has helped us a little bit, but in the past, this is actually one of the difficult one to do. So we wanted to make sure that we have the carrot to dangle in front of the employee to actually allow or to motivate them to actually finish this. So the bank came out with the carrot of 1 additional day of annual leave if they successfully complete the 12 weeks program. And along the way, as they complete each of the module that I mentioned, there is an assessment. So you cannot just go through it in the background and not listening to it. There is an assessment at the end that you need to pass, right, to actually get to that finish line. And also, what we have done is that we have also put them in teams, which I will talk a little bit about it later, to actually encourage each other to get to the finish line. Now, the whole intent of this program, the way it was designed, 1 day of in-person training followed by 12 weeks of virtual training, is to build a new habit for learning, right? So if you can build a habit, then you have the ability to pick up something new very quickly. Now, to build a habit based on behavioral science is that you need to repeat the same action for 21 times. So the 12 weeks that we have actually built in is to really allow the staff the ability to repeat the same habit, assessing their learning program over this period of time. Then from an investment standpoint, right, how do we make sure that we are spending prudently and getting the results that we want? First of all, we are staging our program into stages. The 5 areas that I mentioned to you is simply phase 1, where we're actually putting through all our 27,000 employees through that. But once they've actually completed that, they then qualify to go into phase 2. Now, for phase 2, we are no longer asking it as a compulsory, right? Phase 2, the employee has to volunteer themselves. And this is where they can actually deep dive into a couple of areas, for example, in data analytics, in project management. And we are actually adding new focus areas as we go along. So we have built it in a very modular fashion. Now, for these courses, we're actually working with renowned universities all across the region to actually offer these courses to them together with us. They will have to pay for it first, and they can actually reimburse for the investment once they successfully complete this at the end. So this becomes a self-selected process where the investment is targeted towards who have actually built up that motivation. And there's even a phase 3 where employees can even further their development to get a second degree or even a master in the areas of focus. Now, with that, then you see that there's actually a joint investment, a skin in the game, and you are also spending your limited resources in a more directed fashion. And we are starting with, as I mentioned, soft skills first, because this becomes the foundation or the fertilizer, if you will, to allow us then to actually build more specialized deep dives afterwards. Now, then the next question we have to ask ourselves is that I can do this for a small class, but how do I make sure that I can cover all 26,000 employees? Right? I alluded to this design earlier on, that we actually have a one-day live kickoff, in-person kickoff upfront. That is important because one of the biggest obstacle in a e-learning is to actually get on the platform itself. It's as simple as that, right? Many people have actually difficulty downloading, setting themselves up, and they actually give up midway during this process. So this one day live learning, the purpose is are two. One is to actually instill the growth mindset, and we are using experiential learning during this day to actually make people self-discover that they indeed can still learn. And the second part of the day is really about setting them up for the virtual learning afterwards. In fact, we expect them to actually go online to learn while they're in the classroom. So this is actually the irony of it. To solve the e-learning, we have to bring people into a physical location. Now, obviously, with COVID-19, this has actually posed a bit of a new challenge. And we have actually found a way to give the same experience, so a live experience, without having to meet physically. Then the 12-week design on the digital learning is to allow them to actually do their learning anytime, anywhere. But we also want to make sure that this actually create a cadence for them to actually learn throughout this time. And finally, we put them in groups. And these are not groups of people that they know, but groups of employees that we have helped them pick to work together as a group. And they actually compete with other groups as they go along the program, as they participate and complete some of the assessment. They score points for it, and collectively they get into a league table. And they are actually being reminded where they stand in the league table, and we give them small recognition for being actually on top of this league table. And that makes it fun, but it also makes the social nudging, if you will, something that we are able to leverage on to motivate employee to move along and complete the course. And the final area is on employee focus. So let me go through the first one, right? So one of the questions I was often asked is that, how do you justify such an investment that you are making for the organization? And what do you expect to come out immediately after the training? Now, if we were to approach this in a very traditional ROI, if I spend this amount of money and immediately I want to see X benefit, I think we would have been defeated upfront. So we actually make it very clear to the management why we have to actually go through this journey. We're tying this back to what the actually bank stand for, that we actually leave no one behind. And along the investment itself, obviously we have to think of a smart way to limit or to minimize the amount of money that we need to spend to get the maximum output that we can get from it. So we have to be actually quite creative in working out some of this investment. Our partnership with the government, our partnership with some of the local universities as well, also help us manage the investment in a way that can make this scalable. We also want to make sure that the learning doesn't stop after the 12 weeks, and that it is actually being applied in the workplace. So we also work with the managers of the people who are actually going to the training to ask them to ask of a certain things from their staff after they have actually gone through it. For example, in my own shop itself, as part of the data storytelling. Now, this is an expectation that I expect my staff when they come to see me next, that they are actually presenting their recommendation in a way where it is compelling. And you're using this on a daily basis to make sure that it is actually being applied. And I think what you also notice is that the lingo that's being used in the organization start to change. People are referring more to growth mindset, to many of the terms that they actually learn from the Better Youth course. And last but not least, to make sure that this really sticks, is that we have to make sure that we link the development to the career development of the individual. So how we reward them and who gets promoted, and it has to be closely linked to the fact that they are picking up the skills and they are demonstrating the skills at work. And this is the transformation that we're actually doing for the wider bank, and it's our opportunity to have that link to that career development as well. Now, with that, I would like to share with you, some of the early results, and let me qualify that we are in the midst of this program. But for the people that have actually gone through the program, some 97% of them felt that the objectives were achieved, um, um, and 95% felt that the program's delivery was effective, and this is both the in-person and the online delivery. And some 79 or 80% of the people who started the program have successfully completed the program. Obviously, we wanted to go for 100%, but if you compare this with the completion rate, in a sort of a normal program such as this, it is actually very significantly higher. It's almost double that of a normal completion rate. Obviously, we are not stopping here. We want to make sure that we continue to evolve the program such that all 27,000 employees go through it and that they benefit from it. So let me pause here now. This is the end of my presentation, and I'll take any question from the audience.
Few from as we were going through your presentation, Dean. So thank you so much for taking us through the journey. So I think there's one question which came from the audience was, you start as a compulsory program to make sure that everyone is going to get the opportunity, even if they're prioritizing it or not. I think that was a starting point. So how much percentage you've seen from compulsory to volunteer, and what's a good ratio for organizations to target? And I know it's difficult to have a target on that because you really want to make sure that people are volunteering for the second phase. But what's a good ratio? And how do you think? How do you self-assess your own success on stage 2 or moving to the volunteer self selection phase?
Yeah. So to be very honest with you, right? For stage 2, we don't have a specific target in mind, because we also do not want to force people into taking out phase 2, because phase 2 has to be self-driven. I think learning is one thing that you can only bring the cow to the water, but the cow has to actually drink the water in itself. The important part is that we have actually the right people who actually sign up for it. Now, if I have to make a guess, if I can get 10% of the population going into phase 2, I think that will be a big plus. And the reason for that is because not everyone needs to go to phase 2, just to be sure, right? I mean, the phase 1 is to really opening up their mind and to provide them with some basic skills that they can further deepen in their self-learning. And at UOB, we have actually an e-learning platform that has lots of resources that they can actually self-learn. But the phase two is actually a very directed and very specialized learning where a very significant amount of personal time commitment is actually required. And we don't expect everyone to be able to make such sacrifice. But for those who wants to do so, this is available for them. So for me, if a target of 10% we can achieve, I think that would be good.
Very nice. Thank you. Thanks, Dean. There's a question specifically about what are you specifically doing for the Gen X to get more engaged with this program? And I probably would like to extend that, saying, okay, how do you make it more multi-generational in nature? How are you addressing the different needs of different generations with a one scalable program, but at the end of the day, also kind of segmented?
Yes. Very interestingly, because you could see that the program that we have launched, we have intentionally kept it as a one program. And the program was actually designed with all these different segments in mind, right? So Gen X is definitely one of the segments, but we also have our older generations who we are also targeting, and the younger generations which are actually coming into the workforce as well. So a lot of the nudges that you see, a lot of the thinking process that actually has gone behind it will actually apply to many and across the different population. Take the one day carrot that we are dangling at the end, right? That actually will appeal to the newer generation a lot more than the older generation, because they see the benefit versus the effort that you need to put in may not quite commensurate with what they're looking for. However, for the older generation, the social nudging part actually works a lot better because for many of them they have a reputation and they like the fun of actually learning together, and that actually moves them along that journey. So different elements have actually impact disproportionately on the different segments that we have there.
Very nice. Thank you. So as you were taking us through the MILE framework, there were a lot of elements or components that you have built and experimented with. If you were to share one of them that was a big surprise for you in terms of the kind of impact that experiment brought into the success of the program, which one would you highlight?
There were so many different innovations that we try to bring it in. But actually, if I may pick one, I actually thought the social nudging was one that actually worked extremely well. Despite having all the carrots that we have actually put in place, to our surprise, some people took it very seriously. The competition, they would actually call up their co learner to say, "Hey, you have not done yours yet. No, you're pulling us behind." So they were very gung ho about finishing top, for some of those learning, and that actually worked out quite well, in my view. Right, one of the most interesting element. Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you, Dean. So we have a lot of questions still, but I think we'll have to start wrapping up in the next couple of minutes. But I still want to take this question about how do we communicate the need for urgency for skilling and upskilling without creating panic? I think that's a very interesting question. So what's your point of view on this?
So the presentation that I just took you through today is actually the same presentation that I've actually taken the organization through. In fact, we have created a video out from the presentation. So the very first day in-person training, the objective is to make people aware that these changes are coming. But as you've seen from my message itself, it's not all doom and gloom, right? In fact, there's actually a positive side to it that you can actually look forward to it. In fact, many actually have emerged stronger and better off as a result of the disruption. But the key is that you need to be on the right side of the disruption, and you have the ability to manage that. Right? So that's the message that we are sending.
Wonderful. Thank you. So my last question, then before we close, and we have a lot of professionals from the learning and development space who have joined us today. So what will be kind of like your word of advice as we close this session on, one of the things that you will invite everyone to stop doing as learning leaders, and one thing that you think they should start doing? So one stop, one start as we close today's session.
So maybe let me share with you a personal experience. Right? A few years back, I actually attended a Vipassana meditation retreat. It's a 10-day silent retreat. I actually thought that it was one of the most eye-opening learning experience that I've had, because after you have gone through the training, it is not a conceptual learning, but it's ones that fundamental change your outlook of life and change your habit and behavior afterwards. And one of the key aspects of the learning is that you don't tell, you actually show, you experience first, and then you talk about the theory afterwards. So one of the things that I would actually encourage a lot of us to rethink about is that as we design programs for our staff, if we can actually build some of the element where you can actually experience first and then explain later, I think you'll find that it's a lot more powerful than if we just preach and expect staff to actually follow through. Now, what to stop? Since my Vipassana training, I have actually looked at my own personal schedule, and I've actually stopped quite a number of activities that I have, which what I consider as noise. For many of us, we spend numerous hours going through Facebook and things like that. Not against Facebook, and it has connected many people, but sometimes unknowingly we're just stalking people, and these are unproductive time. If you actually start to remove noise from your life, you can create a lot of time for yourself. I actually do 2 hours of meditation a day, and I created it through removing noise from the schedule that I have. That's
Wonderful.
all.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I think you've really taken us in just a little less than an hour. You've taken us through UOV's journey, the learning journey, and even your own personal journey. I think we've really achieved a lot in such a short time. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Esther.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, and we leave you all with this couple of very, very insightful reflections on first experience and then share. And then I think the second one about all of us reflecting about where is our noise and where is our time really going. So thank you so much, Dean, once again for your generosity of spending time with us and having prioritized spending that time and sharing your learnings with us.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. There's a lot more questions that we couldn't cover. Dean, I would invite People Matters team to share the link of the LinkedIn live that we had. A lot of questions are there. And if you could spend a little bit of time, maybe later this week, to go through them and answer them, that'll be fantastic.
Sure, we'll do that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. And everyone else, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being so participant and sharing your questions as well as we were going through the day. And I will see you next week, 30th of April at 3 p.m. Singapore time for our next masterclass, Managing Employee Experience in a High Growth Market with Karthik Krishnamurthy, Managing Director, Cornerstone. And for daily updates, you can, of course, follow People Matters website. You can also download People Matters Sphere, which is our mobile app, and look forward meeting you guys all, everyone again, once again next week. All right. Have a wonderful day, everyone.